Wounds to wisdom, here we grow. Lessons learned, let love flow. Healing hearts, one step at a time. Turn the pain into something divine. Whoa.
Back, everyone. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a topic that I think a lot of us can relate to, unfortunately. It's something that, while common, isn't often talked about openly: healing after betrayal.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, right?
Definitely. So we'll be looking at a podcast script called How to Heal After Betrayal and Build Trust Again. I have a feeling this is going to get really interesting.
Well, you know, betrayal can make you feel really alone, like you're the only one going through it. But honestly, it's something that almost everyone will experience at some point. It really is almost universal.
That's so true. And it really doesn't have to be some big, dramatic event to leave a real impact. Even smaller betrayals, like, I don't know, maybe a friend breaks a promise or talks about you behind your back, even those things can really sting.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it makes sense when you think about it, right? Because the pain comes from that broken trust. It shakes the foundation of how you see the world, especially if it's someone you really depended on.
So, for someone who's maybe going through this and trying to make sense of everything, how would you actually define betrayal?
Betrayal, at its heart, happens when someone we trust, really trust, breaks that trust in a way that hurts us. Could be anyone, really. A partner, a family member, a friend, someone you work with. Anyone we have that bond of trust.
I imagine the impact goes way beyond just the act itself, right? There's a whole bunch of emotional fallout to work through.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the script we're looking at really highlights this. It talks about how betrayal can really mess with you. Self-doubt, insecurity, anger, the whole 9 yards. It's tough to deal with all those emotions.
It makes me think about the folks you've worked with who've been betrayed. What are some of those common reactions you've seen?
One of the most common, and honestly it's really heartbreaking, is self-blame. People start questioning themselves, thinking, what did I do wrong to cause this? It just adds so much more pain to an already painful situation.
It's so understandable, but also so misplaced. It's like the script emphasizes betrayal often says a lot more about the betrayer, about them, than about the person who was betrayed.
Couldn't agree more. The first step toward healing is realizing that. It's not your fault. It's about getting that the other person's actions, their choices, really come from their own character, their own stuff.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's say you've been betrayed and you're starting to work through blaming yourself. What's next? Where do you begin to heal?
Well, the script lays out 4 major steps toward emotional recovery. They might seem kind of strange at first, but they're a really solid way to approach this whole process.
Let's break those steps down one by one, shall we? What's the first step?
You know, it might sound a little counterintuitive, but the first step is actually letting yourself grieve.
Grieve. Like you grieve a loss.
Exactly. Because in a way, that's what it is, right? You've lost that trust you had in that person, the relationship as you knew it. It's gone. And that loss, it needs to be acknowledged, grieved.
So it's okay to feel those messy, raw emotions.
Okay, it's crucial. Sadness, anger, confusion, all of it. Letting yourself feel it is a part of healing. Trying to bottle it up will only make the pain last longer.
The script mentions journaling as a helpful tool here. What are your thoughts on that?
Journaling can be super powerful, especially when you're dealing with something as emotionally loaded as betrayal. It helps you get all those swirling thoughts and feelings out of your head onto paper. And sometimes just writing it all down can make things clearer.
So is there any particular way you'd suggest using journaling for betrayal, specifically?
One technique that I've found to be really effective is having folks write a letter to the person who betrayed them, but here's the catch. They don't actually send it, it's purely for them to process their own feelings.
So it's like a safe space where you can let those raw, unfiltered feelings out without worrying about what the other person thinks.
Precisely. A way to get that pent-up anger, the hurt, the confusion, all of it out without actually having to interact with the person.
I can see how that would be really helpful. Okay, so we've talked about grieving the loss, using journaling as a way to process. What's the next step in this emotional recovery process?
It's all about setting healthy boundaries.
Why are boundaries so important after a betrayal?
Well, often to heal, you need space, both physically and emotionally, from the person who hurt you. That space lets you focus on yourself, your well-being, your own path to healing.
I bet it can be really hard to set those boundaries, especially if you are close to this person.
It absolutely can be. But it's important to remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's about protecting yourself, giving yourself the time and space to heal.
What if the person who betrayed you doesn't respect those boundaries, though?
That's where things get really tricky, and we'll definitely get into that more later. But for now, let's stick with establishing those boundaries in the first place. It's about communicating your needs clearly and then actually taking action to protect your well-being, even if it means limiting contact or walking away from the whole relationship.
That's a powerful message. It sounds like boundaries are about taking back control, that sense of agency.
Exactly. It's about realizing that you have the right to protect yourself, physically and emotionally.
Okay, we've got grieving, setting boundaries. What's the third step in this whole recovery thing?
Seeking support. This is crucial because healing from betrayal can feel incredibly isolating. Talking to someone you trust, a friend, family member, therapist, it can make a world of difference.
What are the advantages of getting support in this type of situation?
First and foremost, it helps you realize you're not alone in this. Knowing that someone understands what you're going through, that's incredibly validating, comforting. But even beyond that, talking to someone can help you get some perspective on the situation. They can offer a different point of view, maybe help you challenge those negative thoughts you might be stuck in and remind you of your strengths, your resilience.
What about therapy specifically? How can a therapist help someone through this?
A therapist can be invaluable, really. They give you that safe, supportive space to really dig into those feelings, to work through the trauma of it all and figure out how to cope with all the emotions that come with betrayal.
So it's about having a professional there with you, someone who understands this stuff and can help you get to that point of healing.
Exactly. And therapists, they have the training, you know? They understand the complicated nature of relationships, trust, all of that. They can give you those strategies that actually work, that are based on evidence, to work through these challenges and build healthier relationships in the future.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I've got grieving, setting boundaries, reaching out for support. What's the last piece of this emotional recovery puzzle?
The last step, and honestly it's one you never really stop doing, is self-care.
Self-care is often talked about as bubble baths and face masks, but it feels like it's a lot deeper than that, especially in this situation.
Oh, for sure. After betrayal, self-care becomes about actively doing things that nourish your mind, body, and soul. It's about remembering your worth and finding joy again.
What are some of the self-care things you'd recommend to someone going through this?
It can be literally anything that brings you a sense of peace, joy, a feeling of accomplishment, whatever works for you. The script mentions stuff like trying a new hobby, getting some exercise, or spending time out in nature. All great examples because they help you reconnect with yourself, rediscover what makes you feel alive.
I love that. It's like after going through something so hard, you get to rediscover who you are. You're reclaiming your identity, your sense of self.
And self-care is also about being kind to yourself, having compassion for yourself. It's acknowledging that you're going through something rough and giving yourself permission to rest, recharge, and put your well-being first.
That's so important. So we've now gone through all 4 steps the script talks about for emotional recovery. Grieving the loss, setting boundaries, looking for support, and practicing self-care. I think it's pretty clear that healing from betrayal isn't a quick fix, it's a journey.
It absolutely is. It takes patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to put in the work. But the great thing is, healing is always possible. You don't have to let betrayal control you or define your future.
That's reassuring to hear. But I imagine a lot of people listening might be thinking, even after all these steps, is it really possible to rebuild trust?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to be honest, it's complicated. The script actually dedicates a whole section to this, advising people to really think it through. Rebuilding trust takes real commitment from everyone involved, and it's not always possible or even a good idea to try.
So what should you consider when deciding whether or not to even attempt to rebuild trust with someone who betrayed you?
One of the biggest things is whether the person who betrayed you actually takes responsibility for what they did. If they're in denial, downplaying it, or blaming you for their behavior, rebuilding trust is going to be incredibly difficult, probably impossible.
Accountability seems like a non-negotiable part of this.
Absolutely. Without it, there's nothing to build on. Trust can only start to grow again when the person who broke it owns up to the harm they caused, shows real remorse, and demonstrates that they're willing to actually change.
So it's not just about saying, I'm sorry. It's about showing it, actually taking those steps to fix things and earn back that trust.
Exactly. Words are important, but actions are what really count. The person who betrayed you has to show, through their actions over time, that they really mean it, that they're committed to doing things differently.
So consistency is key here. It's about seeing a pattern of behavior that matches what they're saying, proving that they deserve a second chance.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Rebuilding trust takes time, it's gradual, it takes patience, observation, and a willingness to take things slowly.
And I imagine that even if the person does take responsibility and makes an honest effort to change, there's still a lot of emotional baggage to sort through.
Definitely. Betrayal leaves scars. Even when trust starts to rebuild, you'll probably have those moments of doubt, insecurity, maybe even anger.
It's not a straightforward path then. There will be ups and downs, setbacks, but hopefully breakthroughs too.
Exactly. It's a journey. And that's where those earlier steps we talked about, grieving, setting boundaries, seeking support, self-care, they become even more crucial. They equip you to navigate those challenges and stay grounded in your own healing.
This has been so helpful already, and I think it's really important to remember that betrayal can happen in any type of relationship, not just romantic ones.
That's so true. Friendships, family relationships, even at work. The principles we've been talking about, they apply across the board.
So no matter who betrayed you or what kind of relationship it was, these steps toward healing and rebuilding trust are still relevant.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding the dynamics of betrayal, how it impacts us emotionally, and then taking those steps one by one to heal and move forward.
Such a powerful message. And I think it leads perfectly into our next discussion, where we'll dive deeper into the challenges of building trust in new relationships after experiencing betrayal. It's interesting, right? We've been talking about healing and maybe rebuilding trust with the person who betrayed us. But what about when it comes to starting new relationships after going through something like that? That feels like a whole different ballgame.
It definitely is. After you've been betrayed, it's completely natural to feel kind of hesitant, guarded even. You might start questioning people's motives, always expecting the worst.
That's like that saying, once bitten, twice shy, right? But in a relationship sense.
Yeah, exactly. Betrayal can really shake your belief in people. It makes it tough to open yourself up again, knowing you could get hurt.
So how do you even begin to approach new relationships when you're carrying that baggage? It's like walking into a minefield, waiting for that next explosion.
Well, the first thing, and it's probably the most important, is to remind yourself that not everyone is going to betray you. I know it's easy to fall into that trap, thinking everyone's untrustworthy, but it's just not true.
It's like thinking all dogs bite just because one bit you once.
Right. It's about realizing that one person's actions don't represent everyone else.
That makes sense, but it still feels a little scary, you know? It's one thing to know it in your head, but actually feeling it is different.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where therapy can really help. It gives you that safe space to work through those past hurts, challenge those negative thoughts, and figure out how to build healthier relationships moving forward.
So it's not just about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person yourself, in a way.
Exactly. Healing from betrayal often means doing some inner work. Understanding your role in past relationships and any blind spots you might have. For example, understanding your attachment style can be really helpful.
Can you explain what attachment style means? Some people might not be familiar with that.
Sure. Attachment theory basically says that our experiences as kids, really early on, shape how we form and navigate relationships throughout our lives. There are different attachment styles like secure, anxious, avoidant, and fearful avoidant, each with its own patterns and tendencies.
So someone who's anxious might always be looking for reassurance and validation, while someone avoidant might pull away when things get too close.
Exactly. Understanding your own attachment style can help you see any unhealthy patterns you might be repeating in relationships, which is super valuable, especially after being betrayed. It's about becoming aware of those patterns so you can make more conscious choices.
That's fascinating. It's like having a map for your relationships. Understanding the landscape and where the potential hazards are before you even start.
Love that analogy. It's about becoming a more informed and intentional navigator of your relationships.
Okay, so let's say you've done some of that inner work, you're starting to understand your pattern, maybe even working with a therapist. What are some practical steps you can take to actually start building trust in new relationships?
Well, first things first, set realistic expectations. Trust takes time. It builds gradually. It's not going to happen overnight. Don't expect to feel completely comfortable and vulnerable with someone new right away.
Like dipping your toe in the water instead of jumping right in.
I like that. Take your time. Pay attention to how the other person acts, how they treat you, both in what they say and what they do. Consistency is key.
What are some specific signs to look for? Signs that someone is trustworthy?
Look for patterns of behavior that show integrity, honesty, and respect for your boundaries. Do they follow through on what they say they'll do? Are they open and honest in their communication? Do they really listen when you share your concerns and respect your needs?
Those sound like pretty basic qualities for any healthy relationship, but I imagine they become even more important after you've been betrayed.
Oh, absolutely. After going through that, it's only natural to be more aware of those red flags, those little hints that something might not be quite right.
What are some of those red flags people should be watching out for?
A big one is a lack of accountability. If someone is always blaming others for their mistakes, refusing to own up to their actions, that's not a good sign. They might not be someone you can trust.
It's like that saying, when you point a finger, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you.
Exactly. In a healthy relationship, both people need to be willing to admit when they've messed up and work together to find solutions.
Another red flag I can think of is dishonesty, even about little things.
Absolutely. If someone is okay with lying about small stuff, it can easily escalate. It chips away at trust and makes the whole relationship feel shaky.
And what about when someone's words and actions don't match up? If they say one thing but do another, that's a pretty clear sign that something's off right.
Without a doubt, trust is built on consistency. If someone's actions keep contradicting their words, that's a major red flag. It tells you they might not be reliable or trustworthy.
So it's about paying attention to those subtle mismatches, those times when what they say and what they do just don't line up.
Exactly. And trust your gut feeling. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it.
Speaking of gut feelings, I think intuition plays a huge role in new relationships, especially after you've experienced betrayal.
I totally agree. After being betrayed, your intuition might actually be stronger. You might be more sensitive to those little cues that signal danger or untrustworthiness.
So it's about tuning in to those inner alarm bells and not just brushing them off.
Exactly. Your intuition is a powerful tool. Don't be afraid to use it. Something feels off, take a step back, assess the situation, and protect yourself.
It's almost like you're recalibrating your internal compass, becoming more attuned to those subtle signals you might have missed before.
I love how you put that. It's about becoming more aware of your own inner world and learning to trust your own judgment.
Okay, so we've talked about realistic expectations, red flags, trusting your gut. What about communication? What role does that play in building trust in these new relationships?
Communication is absolutely essential. Open, honest, and respectful communication is the foundation of any healthy relationship. But it becomes even more crucial when you're trying to rebuild trust after betrayal.
What does that look like practically?
It means being clear about your needs and what you expect, really listening to the other person, and being willing to have those tough conversations when they come up. It's about creating a safe space where both of you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts and feelings without feeling judged or rejected.
So it's not just about talking, it's about truly listening and trying to understand each other's points of view.
Exactly. And it's about being willing to be vulnerable, to share your own experiences, including how past betrayals may have affected you.
That can feel really risky, especially when you're just getting to know someone. How do you find that balance between being vulnerable and protecting yourself?
It's about going at a pace that feels right for you. You don't have to share everything all at once. Start small, share a little bit about yourself, and see how the other person reacts. Do they listen with empathy? Do they respect your boundaries?
It's like testing the waters, seeing if they deserve your trust before you go all in.
Exactly. And remember, you have the right to take your time. Trust is earned, not given.
So, what advice would you give to someone who's struggling to communicate their needs and boundaries in a new relationship?
Start with yourself. Get really clear about what your needs and boundaries are before you try to communicate them. Journaling can be helpful for this. Once you know what you need, you can start expressing those needs in a clear, assertive way.
Assertive communication seems really important here. Standing up for yourself while still respecting the other person's perspective.
You got it. It's about finding that middle ground, expressing yourself clearly, but also listening to their needs.
So it's not about being bossy or controlling. It's about having self-respect and communicating in a way that encourages understanding and working together.
Exactly. And remember, if someone keeps disrespecting your boundaries or dismissing your needs, that's a huge red flag. It might mean they're not the right person for you, even if you care about them a lot.
That's a really good reminder. Sometimes the best thing you can do, even if it hurts, is to walk away from a relationship that's not good for you.
Absolutely. Putting your well-being first is never selfish. It's crucial for building healthy and fulfilling relationships.
So we've talked about open communication, setting boundaries, watching out for red flags. What about forgiveness? What part does it play in rebuilding trust, both with yourself and with others? Forgiveness is a heavy word, isn't it? Especially when we're talking about betrayal and healing. What are your thoughts on this? I think it's something a lot of people really struggle with.
Yeah, you're right. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. It can be really tough, especially when you've been hurt badly. It's important to remember that forgiveness isn't about saying what they did was okay or letting them off the hook.
So it's not about saying it's fine or pretending it didn't happen.
Not at all. Forgiveness is really more about you. It's about letting go of that anger, the resentment, the pain that's keeping you stuck.
It's like carrying around a heavy weight. All that anger and resentment, it can really weigh you down and stop you from moving on.
That's a great way to put it. Forgiveness is like setting that weight down. It's about choosing to let go of those negative feelings and finding peace.
I think a lot of people struggle with that though, especially when they've been really hurt. It can feel like you're betraying yourself somehow, like you're letting the other person win.
I get that. And it's important to remember that forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. It takes time and work. And it's not always a straight line either. Some days you might feel like you're making progress, and then other days, bam, the anger and resentment come right back.
So what's that process actually like? Are there like steps to it?
There are stages, yeah. The first one is usually acknowledging the pain, letting yourself feel all those emotions that come with betrayal. Don't try to push them down or pretend they're not there.
It's about honoring those emotions, giving them space, not trying to bury them.
Exactly. You got to feel the pain, the anger, the sadness, all of it. It's the only way to start working through it.
What comes after acknowledging the hurt?
Usually there's a shift in perspective. This isn't about excusing what they did, but it's about trying to see the bigger picture.
So you mean sort of stepping back from your own immediate feelings and trying to see things more objectively?
Yeah, and it can be really hard, especially when you're still raw, but it's a big part of forgiveness. It helps you start to detach from the anger and resentment that are holding you back.
Is there anything you'd suggest to help with that shift in perspective?
Sometimes it helps to remember that hurt people, they tend to hurt other people. A lot of times, the people who hurt us most are the ones who are hurting themselves. It doesn't make it right, but it can help you understand things a little better.
So it's about recognizing that maybe their actions come from their own pain, not because you're not worthy or something.
Exactly. It's about moving away from blame and towards understanding. And understanding doesn't mean you agree with what happened. It just means you're trying to see things from a more nuanced view.
That's a helpful distinction. So after that shift in perspective, what's next?
Often, it's making the decision to forgive. This is a choice. You're actively choosing to let go of that resentment and anger.
It's not just a feeling then. It's something you decide to do.
Right. You're choosing to move on, to let go of the past. You're realizing that holding on to anger is only hurting you, not them.
How do you even do that? It all seems so abstract.
Yeah.
How do you actually choose to forgive someone who hurt you that badly?
There are lots of different ways. Some people write a letter to the person talking about their hurt and anger, but also their decision to forgive. Some people find comfort in prayer or meditation.
So it's about finding what works for you, what feels right based on your own beliefs.
Exactly. There's no right or wrong way. It's a personal journey.
And I'd imagine it has its ups and downs. It's probably not just a straight line to forgiveness.
Of course not. You'll probably feel like you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back sometimes. The anger might come back. That's totally normal.
So it's not about expecting to be perfect, not getting down on yourself when you have those moments.
No, it's about being patient with yourself, understanding that this is a process. And it's okay to ask for help along the way. Therapy can be a great support.
It's like having someone there with you to help you through those rough spots. And the reward, I guess, is that feeling of peace and freedom.
Exactly. Forgiveness is about being able to heal and move on without being dragged down by the past. It's about taking back your power, your sense of well-being.
And that brings us to another important part of healing from betrayal, which is self-compassion. I feel like we've touched on this throughout our conversation, but it seems especially important when we're talking about forgiveness.
You're right. Self-compassion is crucial here. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you'd give a close friend going through something similar.
We're often so hard on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We judge ourselves way more harshly than we judge others.
So true. We set these impossible standards for ourselves, and then we beat ourselves up when we inevitably don't meet them. But when you're dealing with betrayal, it's so important to quiet that inner critic and practice self-compassion instead.
How do you actually do that? How do you cultivate self-compassion, especially when you're feeling hurt and vulnerable?
Start by acknowledging your pain without judgment. Recognize that you're human. Everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to be imperfect, to have those moments of weakness or vulnerability without putting yourself down for it.
So you're saying treat yourself with the same grace and understanding you'd offer someone you love who's struggling.
Exactly. And talk to yourself with kindness and encouragement, just like you would to a friend. Be your own best friend, your own cheerleader.
I love that. It's about knowing that you deserve love and kindness, even when you mess up, even when you're hurting.
That's it. Self-compassion is like a shield against the shame and self-blame that often comes with betrayal. It helps you heal and move forward with more self-awareness and resilience.
So healing from betrayal isn't just about the external wound, it's about taking care of the internal one too.
Well said. Real healing means addressing both. It's about working through the damage to the relationship while also building self-compassion and self-love.
Like two wings of a bird. You need both to fly.
I love that. It's about finding that balance, nurturing those relationships with others and with yourself.
This has been so insightful. We've covered so much, from that initial shock of betrayal all the way to forgiveness and self-compassion.
It's been quite the deep dive. And I think the most important thing to remember is that even though betrayal is incredibly painful, it doesn't have to define you or your future.
Healing is possible. It's a journey worth taking.
It really is. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There's help out there, like therapy and support groups that can guide you and support you.
Asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. So to everyone out there who's struggling after being betrayed, know that healing is possible. Be kind to yourself, embrace the process, and remember that you're worthy of love, trust, and happiness.
And never underestimate how strong you are. You're more resilient than you think.
This has been an incredible deep dive, and I have a feeling you've got a lot to think about. Until next time, take care, and remember, you're not alone on. Thank you for tuning in to Wounds to Wisdom, where every heartbreak turns into a breakthrough, and every lesson becomes a blessing. Remember to subscribe, share, and join our community of love and growth. Together, let's rewrite the stories of our hearts, one wise decision at a time. Until next time, remember, your journey is your power, and your wisdom is your greatest gift. Stay inspired and stay loved.
From wounds to wisdom, we rise so strong, learning, loving where we belong. Heal your heart, embrace the right, burrow through the pain with love as our guide.